Often I title my sessions Practical Wisdom in Precarious Times, because we are living in very precarious times. Our very existence, I think all of the higher life forms' existence is threatened by our activities. And it's not just confined to our one generation or our particular moment in history. It's been coming a long, long time. We've been mucking about, but now we have truly the capacity to destroy much of life in a very short time, and we're pretty effective in doing that so far. We have changed our climate. We are going to have, inevitably, we're going to have huge effects. We are already seeing huge effects from that. By some estimates, some very credible scientific estimates are saying that for every 1 degree rise in temperature, that's 1 degree Fahrenheit, there's a 10% reduction in grain production worldwide. They say that we can expect a 4-degree rise if we do nothing. That will be inevitable. So that's a 40% reduction in grain production worldwide. As these kinds of pressures, not to mention, of course, the energy shortages we're going to probably be facing, as these pressures occur, there's more and more battling for resources, for the few resources that can sustain a little bit longer. And that means more wars and more populations who become environmental refugees, moving onto smaller and smaller areas of land. At the same time, we are also killing the life of the oceans. A lot of the fish are dying. The reefs are dying. The water table is being polluted at rates that are hard to keep up with, and there's a big push to privatize the water so it will be sold back to us like oil or gold. This is what we are now facing. This is what we as a human family have to come to terms with. And what I would like to propose, because I've been thinking about these kinds of things for 30 years, I specialized as a journalist in these issues long ago, and for the last 20 years I've been sharing what I call Dharma dialogues, which are ways of finding practical wisdom in our lives, both in our personal lives and our lives as a human community. So in the face of these kinds of threats, certainly lots of people feel anxiety, depression, worry, anger, and apathy even, a kind of resignation. These are normal feelings, of course, to feel in the face of such dire threats. However, they're not going to be very effective in being helpful. What are some ways that we can be more effective? The first consideration is to find a way to stay calm. Now, this may seem trite. Be calm seems a trite admonition, but of course it's the first rule in any emergency. Without your own calm, you have no intelligence operating. You have no clarity. You have no elegance of solution. So being calm not only calms you as an effective means for your carrying on, but it spreads calm. It makes those around you a little bit more calm. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about how if a number of people are on a boat, and let's say the boat gets a leak in it, a hole in it, and starts leaking, if everyone panics, they will almost certainly drown. But if one person can manage to stay calm, can see his or her way through to figuring out how to handle the leak without pure panic, that calm has a chance of spreading, and that calm in the boat then has a chance of saving their lives. And it's the same for us. If everyone is panicked and then becoming very self-obsessed and often going into war as a result, then we will surely be facing our demise. But if calm starts to spread, if a number of people start to share a feeling of calm and of community in that calm, perhaps we would then have some chance of saving ourselves. My suggestion is to do whatever it takes in your life to try to be calm and try to stay calm. That doesn't mean that there aren't times that you have anxiety and nervousness yourself. That's fine. But if it's chronic, then you are draining yourself and you're yet another body on the pile to be taken care of. So the recommendation is to find ways in your own life that are for you a delight, for you a rest. Sometimes that might mean a withdrawal from certain types of news just temporarily, because you can find yourself more and more agitated and scared if you're just constantly ingesting scary, bad, horrifying news about the future, the potentials for the future. So you want to manage that. You want to limit it if it's taxing you to the point of collapse. You also want to, on the other hand, keep your joy factor high. So that means doing things for yourself each day that allow you to be at ease. We find the ways in our own lives, according to our own nature, to calm ourselves down. For some people that might be a walk in the park, or a walk in nature, or staring at the night sky, or playing with your puppy or your child, or meditating you might be sitting on a meditation cushion or lying down or listening to Dharma. Whatever it is that calms you down, whatever your thing is. It doesn't have to be a formula that anyone else is doing. It can be your own thing. But let yourself have it as a priority. And it's really important. And this is not an indulgence. It's your way of staying tuned up. It's your way of making sure that the instrument that you are is going to be well played. And it's a very, very important priority to keep in your heart. So make sure you find ways in your own life, in the face of everything. And after all, losses come to us, not just these big, huge global losses that I'm speaking about, but all the other personal losses that we can all be sure are coming and have been coming. So this is also a way to handle all of those kinds of difficulties in life as well. The next reflection is, don't indulge dark visions of the future. Now that doesn't mean that when you're watching the news or you're hearing the reports, our very good scientific reports of the predictions, certainly pictures may come into your mind about what might be in the future. You might be picturing apocalyptic images you've seen in various movies, or you might be picturing clear cuts that you've actually seen, clear cuts of forests, and all kinds of industrial pollution that you've perhaps seen. There's all kinds of ways that pictures about the future that are born of past stored imagery or of movies or whatever can haunt us. But it's really best, if you can, to move your attention back into present awareness and not indulge the dark pictures of the future. Not in some Pollyannish way that is ignoring the problems. I'm not speaking about any kind of denial, of course, but to not assume an apocalyptic vision. That is not going to help you or anyone else, and it's not going to help any possibility of seeing our way through this by constantly picturing darkness and destruction. Now, how does one, in the face of so much of this information, when we actually see the images of the gigantic icebergs breaking, and we see the numbers of the deaths of the fish and of the wildlife and of the destruction of the rainforest and so on, how is it possible that we don't have an assumption that it will continue in this way? And even if there are those images floating in your mind. One has to always consider that there may be solutions that we don't yet know, as there have been to so many problems. And I'm not talking about techno fixes. I'm not talking about bioengineering and seeding the clouds and spraying foam on the ocean to reflect back the light and so on. All of those solutions seem to me more of the destruction. It'll just destroy us further. But there may be other elegant solutions, smart solutions, wise solutions that we haven't yet thought of. So let's not just assume total unmitigated destruction. That's not going to help, and it's not going to help us to picture that. We see we've got a problem, we know that, but let's not make it worse than it already is. The next reflection, this is one of my favorites, of course, is be in love with your life. Be in love with your life, because your life is precious and you probably secretly love it. You haven't been admitting it maybe, but you do probably love it. Often people don't really admit it until it's about to go away at the end. And then, on your very last day, you might have the understanding that you would trade anything to have even one more of your old miserable days back, of your old most boring days, or the day that you had a car wreck, or the day that your lover left you, or whatever. Any of the days would be fine from the vantage point of having no more days left. So let's get honest about it as we go. Be in love with your life. And this induces contentment. And contentment is, in my opinion, one of the most radical political acts anyone can engage in, because it is the opposite of the constant consumption of resources that most people are raging and racing along in. And contentment allows us to walk very lightly on this earth. Contentment is the balm, is the soothing effect that is most needed in this hot fire of desire that is promoted by a consumerist culture. It's the opposite. And being in love with your life allows you so much contentment. You're able to find delight in little things, little small things, all the day long. And that is actually what raises your happiness set point, is finding lots of small delights rather than waiting for some big, gigantic, as Leonard Cohen says, waiting for the miracle to come. Rather than waiting for something in the future or some dramatic event, you're easily content. You're easily delighted. You find yourself laughing and crying easily too, but all of it feels lighter and lighter. Be in love with your life. Admit it to yourself. The other advantage to being in love with your life is that it's kind of contagious. So when you're with someone, as you probably know, when you're with someone who has a kind of inner light, a kind of delightedness, there's a way in which you can sort of see through their lens. It's very, very, there's a strong transmission when you're around someone who's happy, who's just simply happy. Just as there can be also a strong transmission if you're around someone who's angry, that can also jar us, because we are exchanging what is known in neuroscience as mirror neurons. Our brains are actually, bouncing neurons with each other. So there's a great advantage for your own decision to love your life, in that it's also helpful for others. It reminds others that they love their lives as well. The next reflection is to be of service. There's a quote that I love from, I don't even know who, but it's, action absorbs anxiety. That when you're actually in the act of service, that it does absorb the anxiety you might feel. It's like something is being offered somehow. There's some movement in the universe that is taking a stand for the greater good. And even if we don't prevail, taking a stand for the greater good is basically using your own life to vote for the goodness, to be on the side of the angels, and to use your life, to feel well used in your life. These are all very satisfying feelings. Being of service is an antidote to the feelings of despair. And it's also lovely to help other people. It's so needed, and there's so much need. You would never be bored for a moment if that was your intention, to be of service. You find that you think much less about your own needs and your own desires when service is your calling, when service is your intention. And thinking less about yourself is a natural factor of happiness. Obsessing about yourself and constantly thinking about your own needs is usually a form of misery. So being of service is not only a greater possibility of happiness for others, but it's a great inner kind of happiness as well. In using your life to vote for goodness, whether or not what we are successful in any of our endeavors, I love this line from the poet W.S. Merwin. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. On the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree for its own sake. I would also say that sometimes when we give our life to the helping of others, here's our bell in Copenhagen again. When we give our life to helping others, sometimes it may seem that nothing much is happening. It may seem small. Maybe just that some mother is raising her son. Some single mother is working hard to raise a son. But it may be that that son goes on to help a lot of other people. So you never know what the fruits of your efforts are. You give it all over to however that plays out. You let existence take charge of the manifestation of the fruits of your gifts and your offerings. There's definitely a kind of surrender when you truly are letting yourself be used as good compost here in this world. You know, there's a surrender as to what grows from that, or if anything grows from it. But there's a deep surrender that the gift is offered freely, right? That there's not you don't have a bargain, you don't have a deal-making component to this. I often have the koan in a way in my mind of, in approaching any circumstance where a decision needs to be made, I have this phrase, what is the greater good? And maybe sometimes I don't fully give myself in service to the greater good. Sometimes I find myself in moments of selfishness, of course. But I have noticed over time that my dedication is to the greater good. And that is because I have seen over and over that my own well-being is only really served when I am in service to the greater good. That ultimately, anytime I have chosen my own selfish needs, there's a blowback that happens that is quite unpleasant. And the more I go along, the older I get, the more this is noticed. So one more reflection, a final reflection, a big reflection, which is that evolution is doing its thing. That we're here for this moment. We're these creatures here for a moment in time, in vast, unthinkable, unmeasurable time. And you know, we look around and we're very attached to our particular moment in time and our particular creatures in time, of course, and that's as it should be. But it's good to take a few steps of magnitude back and see it all from a bigger picture, just to kind of keep a calm inside. Sometimes I love to, well, especially if I'm in a place where one can really see the stars in the night sky, I love to just lay on a blanket on a field and look at the night sky. We often do this in our retreats, just to remember one's place in the universe, and that how this is all rolling out, whether or not this species goes on much longer, is a part of this evolutionary story. So to really, when one has that kind of free sense about it, it allows, I would say, it allows a greater clarity and a greater peace in the heart to do whatever it takes to serve the greater good, as we've been saying, but to do it from a place of deep quiet, deep surrender and quiet of the heart. Most of the species on this planet have gone extinct in this planetary history, and ours may be one of those. We are speeding up the extinction of a lot of others as well with our actions. So if that is to be, how does one bear it as you're watching it? How does one bear those kind of moments of what if? And it is, I find, a great comfort to just say yes to what is. Underneath all of these 5 reflections is the quietness of the heart, the witnessing presence that is delighted and is calm and is in love with your life and is surrendered to service for the greater good and is realistic about evolution doing its thing.